Welcome to Real Wisdom, where we dive into the real stories of remarkable women. Today, we're excited to welcome Libby DeLana, an award-winning creative director, co-host of the This Morning Walk podcast with Alex L., and author of Do Walk. Libby's journey from leading the ad world to finding comfort and creativity in her daily walks is nothing short of inspiring. And if you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Okay, so Libby,
Yes.
before we even talked the first time, I had found your book and then I became just so curious about what you were doing, your podcast and your just the creative side of you. And the one thing that kept coming up for me, the word that was bouncing around in my head was fearless.
Oh.
You think that that's an accurate description, or do you have a better word that describes yourself?
Well, it's interesting because it'd be interesting to look up the actual definition of fearless. For me, fearless comes with a little bit of, and this is just the way I understand it. This may not be what you're intending at all, but I hear it having a little bit of bravado, a little bit of risk taking. Well, I'm not adverse to taking risks. Maybe a little splash of ego. So for that reason, when you said it,
Mhm.
I identify with it, but I don't think I define myself that way. I think the way I would describe myself is, I guess I have an explorer's heart. I explore a lot. I am curious about the world. Honestly, I'll try just about anything. So maybe that is fearless, but the way I think about it is more of an explorer's mindset.
Okay, well, then maybe curious is a better word to describe. Um,
Yeah,
okay, I'd like to do a fun little thing that I feel kind of gets us learn a little bit more about each other, or maybe just really about you. Okay,
sure. Yeah.
are you want to try it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay,
I'm up for
um,
everything.
it's a little episode of this or that.
Great.
Okay, spontaneous road trip or a well planned vacation.
Both.
No,
See, okay, so here's the thing about a curious mindset is those both sound interesting. I suppose, I don't both?
well, all right, that's good. A solo retreat or a gathering of friends.
Both.
Both. Um, do you need time in your day to kind of um, just take it all in and be by yourself?
Oh, really dramatically. And I think I've just sort of come to realize this in these last few decades, honestly. I think I'm a profound introvert who's learned to be an extrovert. And um So, uh, that is time I really, really cherish. In fact, I don't think I'm myself unless I really, spend time solo. And most of we'll get to the conversation, I'm sure, about walking, but, my walking practice is most of the time alone, and I view it as a really exquisite, recharging moment.
Oh, I like that.
Yep.
Um, okay, how about packed agenda or none at all?
I think in the early part of my life, it would have been packed agenda, and now in this part of my life, it's, an open calendar. And I think it shifted, and maybe that's just comes with wisdom. Um, yeah, what I'm not implying is that I don't love a packed I like a lot of to do a lot of things, but I really value, wow, just, space and time and quiet.
Oh, I like that. I feel the same way sometimes. Okay, how about learning a new skill or mastering an old one?
Oh, learning a new skill.
Handwritten note or a text message?
Handwritten note.
A thousand-piece puzzle or a game of Uno?
Uno.
Uno. Oh, okay. All right. I would have thought the other way. You did mention the book, and writing a book is a journey in itself. Is there something that you learned in that process that was enlightening for you?
Well, the book is about a practice that I started 12 years ago, which was to go for a walk every single day, no matter what. And it was an exploration in sort of getting back to myself. And what do I mean by that? When I think back on when I was most me and happiest is probably I'm 10, 11, 12. I'm slightly feral. I'm free range kid out hiking around outside. But the key word there is outside. And I had found about, a little over a decade ago that my life was very identified around being indoors. Life was great, healthy
Hmm.
kids, healthy family, great work, all this, but a lot of it was in carpools or in meetings or in office, and
Wow.
I was not outside. And so my practice was really about, and I wouldn't have called it a practice then. My getting outside to go for a walk every day was to make sure that I was building into it being in the outdoors. And it wasn't meant to be a weight loss tool or even exercise or 10,000 steps. It was really just to be outdoors. So the book is about what I've learned over these 12 years on going for a walk for 12 years, every single day for 12 years. So writing a book is much like creating a practice, which is it requires a certain amount of passion, right? So to
Okay.
write a book, you have to have a really clear thesis. You have to really want to do it. It's no easy task. It's the same with my walking practice.
Hmm.
Um, it takes discipline. It takes a
Yes.
lot of discipline, and there are plenty of days where I don't wanna go out and go for a walk, or it's pouring rain, or whatever the case may be. Um, and, you have to f it's enthusiasm or passion that keeps you going, or your commitment to your practice, and it's the same with writing a book, right? So there's a lot of
Mhm.
parallels. I think for me, the biggest hurdle in writing a book was I spent my career as an art director in the ad world. And in the ad world, art directors and writers are paired together as a team. And so you work together. So my biggest hurdle initially was the little voice in my head that said, "You're not a writer. You've worked with writers. You know very good writers. That is a craft that is exquisite that you really admire, but that's not your craft. My craft is kerning type, choosing typefaces." So I had this, and I still do, this profound respect for people for whom words are their um, in a way, their first language. For me, pictures are my first language. And so the challenge for me was walking through a couple of seasons of not believing that I was a writer. And honestly, I'm not sure I can still say I'm a writer, but I had a friend who said, actually, just tell your story then. Don't worry about
Mm.
being a writer, just tell your story. And that for me was a way to understand it and do it in a way that I couldn't be critical of myself in that space. I'm just telling my story. And so that was a really helpful shift. But it's very parallel to any practice, even if you have a seated meditation practice or a yoga
Mhm.
practice. There is a commitment, there requires passion, enthusiasm, curiosity, again, to learn and extend more. It's the same with writing a book. I mean, it's all, it's sort of everything that's hard takes kind of the same elements: discipline, enthusiasm,
Right.
passion, yeah, commitment.
Do you think you have another book in you?
Oh, I'm doing one right now.
Oh,
I'm putting together a proposal. Which I was hopeful to have the proposal done by the end of the year, and I'm getting close. I'm not quite there yet, but yeah, coming up.
oh, okay. We'll keep that a secret between ourselves, right?
Yep.
One thing I noticed is that you have a unique perspective on failure, and you see that as an essential part of learning.
I
But
do.
you're also a mom. How how do you balance letting your boys learn their own life lessons, but at the same time having that mom instinct to not want them to fail?
Oh, I think the mom's instinct it's a powerful force, isn't it? Right? And I don't think anybody can learn unless you quote unquote fail. Now, the thing is, culture has created this sort of narrative around this concept of failure as it's bad. I
Mhm.
don't think it's bad. I think it's essential. And, if we take away that cultural kind of currency of failure as being you are less than because you failed, and instead view it as essential for learning. Has anybody started anything and not failed along the way? I'm essentially still learning how to fly fish. I love fly fishing. I started maybe a decade ago. I'm still a beginner at it. I fail every single time, all the time. My casts do not look like someone who's been, doing it for decades. And so in the
Yes.
scheme of fly fishing, I'm failing. But guess what? Yeah. The only way I get better is to do that over and over and over and slowly get better and to not judge myself about it. Like
Yeah.
if the only way you're going to actually try something new is to be perfect at it the first time out of the gate, we've lost some of the biggest joys of life. So I view failure as an essential energy to fuel learning and curiosity. I think the
Okay.
problem is that we've created this narrative and this culture around it that it's bad. I view it as essential. I don't know if you've ever heard the story of the woman who founded Spanx, Sarah Barkley, who talked about at her family, her dad would invite everybody at the dining table to talk about the thing they failed at that day. And it was a way to demystify that there was a problem with failure. It was just to say, "Oh, you failed at that? Okay, so what'd you learn? And then what'd you do? And then how did you pick yourself up? And guess what? When you failed, I still love you. Fine.
Mm.
You know what? We are all supposed to do that. There is nobody in this planet who doesn't fail. So I guess to answer your question, and I'm not sure I did this complete always, but obviously if it has to do with safety,
Well, yeah.
you don't let anybody fail. But on the other hand, I think it is essential for kids to do that. It's going to happen in their lives. It's easier if failure happens when they're 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 than it is for the first time at 18, 19, 20. So, and if you quote unquote fail and your family's there to love you and support you, no matter what, doesn't matter, then you learn that failure is a learning tool. I think it is energy that fuels curiosity. I also think there's not much difference between failure and success. I think failure asks you, do you want to keep going? Do you want to continue? Failure, when something happens, so say, I write an article and I get bad feedback, or not even bad, I get feedback and the editor says, that's not, and this happened recently. I wrote an article and the editor was like, that's not really what we were thinking. And I remember thinking at the time, ooh, I totally missed the mark on that. I failed. The truth of the matter was the editor was completely right. And it provided a new opportunity for me to write about something differently. So um, I think the cultural narrative around failure is the problem, not the failing.
You mentioned though comparing it to success and so often I've seen people, and I'm sure you have too, that strive for something and reach that point of success in their lives and just as easily quit because they feel, oh, well, I've got this far and that's what I wanted. And the same as failure, they just stop trying because they think that that's their end point.
Right. And it's maybe it's an invitation to look for another path towards your goal, right? You
Mhm.
might be on a path. So one of the stories I always love is the story of the New Yorker cartoonist, the magazine The New Yorker, and the wonderful cartoons that are embedded within it. There was some statistic. I am not going to get this right, so don't come for me, but it's something like that. A lot of the illustrators will submit something like, I'm totally making this number up, but it's extraordinary. Will submit something like 500 illustrations before one gets accepted,
Could you just
right?
imagine? I
I mean, right? Or think of a tennis player. How many returns on serves you miss before you get a really great one? Most of them, actually. Most. Right? Or for me, when I'm fly fishing, well, how many times I cast out there and I don't get a fish? Most. So if I view each one of those as a failure, wow, and I didn't have a robust sense of, well, okay, so the way I cast last time wasn't so great. I'll try
Mhm.
it a different way. Yeah, I don't think failure is a critique on us individually. I just think it's an invitation to try it again or try it another way.
Why fly fishing though? Where did that come from?
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, it's back to I love being outdoors, right? And to go stand in the middle of a river, brilliant. And I guess it's back to what you first said, which is your sort of initial thought of a word for me was fearless. I guess I've come to a place in my life. I'm about to turn 62, but it's probably a decade or two ago. I just really thought part of the way to stay really vibrant in life was to constantly be learning new things, to be a
Mm.
beginner. A beginner's requires you to be humble. It requires, a certain acceptance of failure as we've been talking about. And
Yeah.
so I started to do new things. In my 40s, I started fly fishing. In my 50s, I started to get my pilot's license. It's sort of, for me, it's a way to light up my brain and meet new people, new communities.
I love this your enthusiasm for trying new things because I think so often um, we're intimidated by the newness of something and think, well, I can't possibly do that. And that which leads me to I follow you on Instagram, and I think you just have like the best Instagram account. It's so beautiful. The one thing that I've noticed is that you are not afraid to jump into a frozen lake, and that makes me nervous. So
Correct.
can you tell me? Can you please tell me? Mhm.
Well, first off, let me just say something about the Instagram feed, which I started literally probably 2 days after Instagram launched because I was in the ad business. I was required as a creative director to know how it worked. And for me, the only way to know how something works was to actually use it. So I've been doing it for a while. And an important note, for me anyway, is that when I post, I view it as my own personal um, sort of like a visual journal, right? I'm an art director, so the visual world is so when I post, I actually don't think about anybody else. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful, but it's
Mhm.
like, oh, I want to remember this. I want to remember that. I want to remember this moment. I want to remember that thought. So I'm glad that you like it. And I will say that it's very spontaneous and kind of ridiculously whimsical. But in any case, jumping into the cold water was something I started the beginning of the pandemic. I guess now 3+ years ago, and it was sort of serendipity. Our pod squad, they're a wonderful bunch of wild and smart and thoughtful friends. We were out for a walk outside and we were walking along the beach on the Atlantic Ocean. And we all just decided, what the heck? Let's just go in. We took our clothes off and we went. And we went in for probably 2 seconds and came right back out and hooted and hollered and all kind of looked at each other and said, wow, we feel great. Like really great.
Mhm.
And then we kept doing it, and we were like, "You wanna go for a walk and get in the water again?" "Yeah," and then we started to read, we read a bunch of books, we read the book about Wim Hof, we started doing research, and at that time, it probably was a little less, in the mainstream conversation, so it was a little harder to find information about it, but
Okay.
we just started to do it quite regularly, and now I can't imagine my life without it. Honestly, I wish I had found it in my 20s. I think it is an incredible tool. Now, granted, it's not for everybody, and everybody's gonna say, "Oh
Mhm.
my god, I hate the cold, I can't do that," and I totally respect that. That was me. I, actually that part of the reason I would get in the water is because, I was going through a couple of things in my life that were really unexpected and, hard. And I thought, "Huh, well, I'm redefining who I am. Now I need a tool to help me do that." I was known as A, I was known as B, I'm no longer known as A and B. So now that this sort of, definition of who I am is changing, how does one change something that we hold very dear? And what I held dear was I hate the cold. Aside from A and B changing, which I don't need to go into, but, I also defined myself as someone who hated the cold, and it was for a very specific reason, which is I was out camping. I got too cold when I was 13. All through the night, I shivered. I was too shy or something to ask for help, and it was scary, really, really scary. So I
Mhm.
always defined as being afraid of the cold. In fact, I was that annoying person in the office who wore the puffy coat when the air conditioning went to, ooh, maybe 68. Like I was so annoying. And so I thought, I wonder if I can change the narrative around that. How sturdy are these definitions of ourselves? So I say I hate the cold. Can I change that? And the short answer is yes. And so I just started getting in the water to begin to explore. Wow, we all define ourselves in certain ways, but those are porous. They're not sturdy.
Mhm.
We choose to identify ourselves in certain ways. And so that was my inquiry into seeing what dropping that definition of I hate the cold. Also, I hate the cold was a limiting belief. I live in New England. It's snowy and icy. It limited what I could do because I was like, no, it's too cold. And that's not the story anymore. So, um, yeah, I think we can redefine who we are at any point.
So now that you do that, now that you get in the water and it's cold and it's icy, does that change your memory of being young and afraid and not wanting to be cold during the night?
Oh, what a beautiful question. Pause and think about it. Does it change my memory? Uh, Gosh, I have 2 competing narratives in my head. One is no, because that little girl, the introvert, a little shy, but
Mhm.
really happy to be in the outdoors, was unable, unwilling to ask for support and help on her own behalf, which is it's really interesting, and I think the current version of myself, almost 62, I ask for help all the time getting in and out of the water. And so it's a really good question. I'm not sure I have an elegant answer for you other than to say a lot of tenderness for her. I have a lot of tenderness for her, and I wish she had known how to ask for support, ask for someone to help, and she was unable, unwilling to do that, and somehow had learned the message that she wasn't supposed to cause a ruffle or, bother anybody. So,
Well, I guess you can say you learned to do that for her, for your
yeah,
younger self.
yeah, no, I think that's a beautiful way to say that. Yeah.
I have one question that I'm dying to ask you just because I know that the walk is such a big part of your life. If you could take a walk with anyone in history, who would it be and where would you walk?
Ooh, there's like a zillion people. Oh my. uh, well, there's so all these people are running through my head. Oh my gosh. Mm, Everybody from Jane Goodall to Beryl Markham, who wrote a book, Westwood the Night, one of my all-time favorite books, to um, Michelle Obama, to Buddha. And I think where I'm actually really landing is I'd like to go back and take some more walks with my dad, who was a very profound force in my life, who was terminally ill and died very young, and was still a significant. His way of being is still very much a part of who I am. So I think I would say, despite all those magical human beings who would be amazing to walk with, I think I'd like to go back and I would like to take a handful of walks with my dad again as an older person and him as an older person. And honestly, it wouldn't matter where we were. So I think the answer is my dad. With me at age 62, and he would be age wow, 92-ish. So, yeah, I think my dad and William.
No, I love that. I think, that we always go, I think you right away you go to a famous person or somebody that um, you think had an impact in your life. But clearly nobody had a greater impact than your dad.
Yeah. No, that's right. I think, there was so I'm 6 feet tall. I was 6 feet tall when I was probably 13 or 14, so you can imagine what that was like. And that was the mid-70s, he was still alive at that point, and that was when the platform shoe was really popular. You could see and he was kind of a jokester. I mean, he was very playful and very elegant, but very playful and very wicked smart. I mean, just exquisitely smart. In any case, he came home one day, he was an attorney, he came home one day from the office, and in a bag, he had a pair of, platform shoes for me. They were probably 4 inches tall. I mean, there's no way I could walk in them. They were white and they had giraffes painted on them. He had a lot of bravado in him. He was very playful. And, I remember him saying, "Put them on." And so I put them on. I wobbled all over. I never wore them beyond that. And he sort of said, "I've heard you say something about not liking to be this tall."
Mhm.
And he sort of said, "Dream bigger, dream bigger." And so whenever I'm out and about and I'm feeling like, I think of those platform shoes and I think of him whispering, "Dream bigger." Like, just dream
Oh,
bigger. So that's why I would love to hear what he had to say right now.
oh, that's a beautiful memory. That
Mhm.
really is. Um, no, it kind of um caught up with me a little bit, but that was very sweet. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
What can I say? Well, there are many points in our lives that I think you don't remember where maybe a decision that we're making is going to change our lives. But yours is very clear and vivid, and I think it was a cold November morning 12 years ago. Am I
Yeah.
am I right? And how do you think you're different today than you were on that morning?
Mhm. Beautiful questions. Yeah, and I would say that decision on that November morning. So I decided to go. I started to think about it on my dad's birthday, actually, November 3rd. I was like,
Mhm.
oh, you know what's missing from my life? The outdoors. And what I mean by that is we all brush our teeth every single day. The outdoors needs to be in my life with that same kind of intentionality, right? For me,
Oh,
it's a non-negotiable, it's required, it, keeps me healthy and, grounded, and so I remember thinking on his birthday, and he'd been dead for quite some time at that point, and then, I started walking on November 9th, which is the day he died. So within that week, I
okay.
remember thinking, and it really didn't have anything to do with him, it just kind of aligned on those days, which now in retrospect feels like, "Ooh, the universe was like, okay." You're gonna start walking on the day your dad died. Um, but I really do remember thinking that it was my life source and, being in the outdoors. And so how am I different today? I have just learned so much with this practice, and I can imagine that anybody who has any kind of practice, whether it's walking a couple days a week, doesn't have to your practice does not have to look like mine. I'm not making any recommendations about anybody else's. This is just what I do and works for me. And it's just I do think going for a walk is a really powerful tool, but it does not have to at all mirror mine. But if you have a yoga practice or a seated practice, I think what happens is that fidelity to that practice, which then means actually, to me, fidelity to a practice is the ultimate expression of self love.
Mhm.
So, to me, going for a walk is the greatest thing I can do for myself any day, every day. Actually, today on my stories on Instagram, I made a little post. I was practically in tears because I got to the end of the walk and I thought, I just love this so much. It was drizzly. I saw a hawk. It just is so important to me. But I guess to answer your question, I think you learn more and more as the years go on. So, I've never really played a video game. I should probably do it so I understand this analogy more clearly. But my understanding is when you play a video game, the longer you play, and the better you get at it, the more keys or gifts or cheats or whatever they're called, levels that you are given. I feel that about walking. The more I walk, the more I learn, the more lessons I am offered. And I know the lessons I am offered today would not have been offered to me 12 years ago, or I wouldn't have seen them. I wouldn't have
Mhm.
understood them. I wouldn't have known them. And it is only because of this faithfulness, this discipline, this commitment to myself that I am able to see these lessons. And they only arrive because I have done however many miles, how many days. And um, um, so I just keep thinking, gosh, I wouldn't stop now, because if I stop, I won't be afforded that next lesson or that next opportunity. And it's only coming because I've done the previous work. I don't even actually, you know what? I shouldn't call it work. It's because I've committed to myself and this practice, that this practice is now says, here you go. Here's another key. Here's another lesson.
It's interesting when you talk about how many miles that you've walked. If someone had told you on that day, I'm going to need you to walk around the world
Whew, yeah,
in order to find yourself, you would have been like, you're crazy.
I know, right? But isn't that funny? Why do we say, why would we, why not? I mean, honestly, my dad would have said, yeah, just start walking, just one step at a time. You don't have to walk the whole circumference of the earth tomorrow. I'm like, just take your time. Yeah, just one step at a time.
One step
And
at a time. That's all it
yeah,
takes.
I want to make sure I also really, um, uh, I do not take this practice for granted. I am so grateful to be able-bodied. I've rarely had an injury. I had one a little while ago, and I was like, "Oh my goodness." I still walked. It looked different. Broke my toe the other day, so I walked a little funny, but, I do not take the ability to do this for granted, and that's maybe part of the reverence, that's part of the spirituality of it, that's part of the, yeah, just exquisite gratitude for the ability to be able to do it.
You see so much heartache in the world, and so many people suffer from different challenges. And you're right to be able to do this every day and not even have to think about how you're going to put one foot in front of the other. It just happens. Like,
And I'm walking in a place where I feel very safe, and it's certainly something a lot of people ask me, "Well, how do you do it if you're walking in a space that," and
Mhm.
we could do a whole podcast on that, so we won't do a deep dive into it, but yes, it's important that when you go out, you feel safe. And that may look like, a fanny pack with a whistle in it or blinking lights, whatever the situation is, but again, I do not take for granted that my ability to feel safe in this space. And I think it's unique for women to walk by themselves in an ecosystem, which is just tragically sad. And so again, I'm not making a recommendation that anybody go out and walk wherever you are willy nilly. I understand it comes with uh, often risk and potentially fear. So, again, I do not take that for granted. I think there are ways to solve some of those things. Again, that's a whole nother podcast, but those are my able-bodied, and the ecosystem that I walk in enable me to do it with a lot of ease and a feeling of being very grounded, which may be perhaps one of the great privileges of life.
you had mentioned this before, but I wanted to just touch on it again. You had painted a picture of your career in the advertising, right? And there was a quote that I saw. Do you mind if of yours if I read it? Okay. And you said that I spent most of my time indoors, in conference rooms, in meetings, on planes, in the house, in the kitchen, in the office, in cars. You said that you were happy, but that you didn't feel whole. And I think I can speak for a lot of women at this stage of our lives where um, they feel the same way, that they do feel happy, but that they're not whole. And what would you say to them if someone said to you that they weren't whole? What's next for them? How do you get past that?
Yeah, great question. First off, I see you. I think, as you noted, that is perhaps a more common feeling than is acknowledged in our culture.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I personally feel really grateful that I think I knew deep down inside. Maybe we all do. You know what? I'm not a scientist, I'm not a researcher, so maybe this is overstepping my knowledge, but maybe we all know deep down inside what it requires to be whole. And um, maybe it's looking back at your 13-year-old self. What did you do instinctually? When you were doing it, what made you most happy? Was it going for a hike? Was it building Legos? Was it cooking? Was it writing in your journal? Was it painting? Um, what was the thing when you were younger that you kind of couldn't wait to do? And when you did it, time passed. And if you had no judgment about whether it was good or bad, up or down, left or right, meaningful or not, if you began to weave that into your day more intentionally, mm, is that a place where you might feel more whole? And I think that's what I did, is I think what I did was realize, oh gosh, that 13-year-old was so happy. I think I described myself as being slightly feral, free range. I think about who she was and how she felt. And I remember feeling, oh, this is kind of who I am. If I could choose anything to do all day, this is what I would do. I'd be dragging sticks through the forest or, out in the barn or whatever. And I think the challenging thing is sometimes culture says those are things, I don't know, they're not worthy. They're not, I mean, in a way, what I like to do is all these things that maybe didn't look like what a lot of the other girls my age were doing. And so I maybe dismissed it or I didn't acknowledge it. And again, at age 50, I was like, okay, well, in a way, who are you? And what is the place that, you feel most grounded and resonant? I do think a really good measure is when you're doing something, if time really passes quickly, take
Mm.
note. Take note because that's when you're in the flow state. And for me, when I'm in the outdoors, I could walk for 5 hours and it feels like nothing. So I think the inquiry for oneself is to think about those places and that time where you couldn't wait to go do that thing again. I describe getting in the cold water this way too, but I describe my walking practice. It sort of feels like falling in love. That's a bit esoteric. I understand this, but you know that feeling when you fall in love? I don't care if it's with a person or a puppy and you can't wait to see them. You can't wait to be in their company. You can't wait to, um, be with them. That's the way I feel about my walk. I can't wait. Again, I told you today I got done with my walk. I practically burst into tears. It's like, this is,
Oh,
uh, yeah. And I think I ended that little story with saying I have one tattoo that I got when I was 60 and it says this morning walk. It's on my left leg on the side of my heart. It's on the inside of my ankle because it's just for me. I'll never get another one, but it's like, that's who I am. That's who I am. And I think your question is a good one, and it's not easy to solve, and it can
mhm.
take some inquiry and some time. But maybe a starting point is asking yourself when you think about what it is that you would love to do regularly all day, what is it? And don't judge it. Just invite it in and then be curious about, maybe figuring out how to weave it into your day a little more.
That was a really lovely answer, and I appreciate all the time that you've taken with me today, and I would love to give you an opportunity. If there's something that you're doing right now or that you're passionate about or that you're diving into and maybe you would like to share it with us today.
Oh, aren't you nice? Well, really, I mean, I guess I've come to a place where my role on this planet right now is to encourage, inspire, invite, to welcome people to take a walk. And there's no judgment around any of it. I don't doesn't matter. It's not doesn't have to be 10,000 steps. Doesn't have to be every day. Doesn't it just is go for a walk uh, and then spend a moment and just see how it makes you feel. And I truly believe there's a lot of magic in it, going by yourself or going with a friend. I do have a podcast called This Morning Walk. My co-host, wonderful Alex L, and I talk about what we're walking through. So it isn't just a podcast on how to lace up your shoes and stay warm in the winter. It's, I guess a little more it's about the lessons that we've learned. We've had some beautiful guests this season who are walking through really significant things in their life, and, yes, they have a walking practice, but again, it's not about 10,000 steps or anything like that,
Mhm.
and so come join us on the podcast, and come join us on Instagram at This Morning Walk, and let us know where you're walking. We love to believe that we have a community of people around the world who are all walking together by themselves, but together, and are seeing some of the really beautiful things in life because we're out walking. And so thank you for that opportunity, but come join us.
Oh, I would highly suggest it to anybody. You and Alex have such a lovely rapport together, and it really is a great listen.
Oh,
So,
thank
yes,
you.
I would tell everybody if they have time and they could listen on their walk.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Libby. This has just been a lovely, lovely morning, and I really appreciate the time that you took.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And, if I didn't do a good job of describing something, please, reach out to me on DM. My handle is Park here. My middle name is Park.
Mhm.
I created it a long time ago, but reach out. I'm happy to, try and articulate something a little more clearly if that's helpful. So reach out.
You got it. You got it. Thank you for joining us on Real Wisdom. If you're inspired by stories like this and want to be part of a community that celebrates the wisdom of women, visit joinempart.com and become part of our conversation. And don't forget to subscribe here for even more real wisdom. Until next time, keep embracing your story.